What's up, guys? I wanted to talk a little bit about something a little different tonight. Um, it's about the OJ confession show that was on Fox, and I saw the show last night. And I was really fascinated with it, and I'm curious to know if there's anyone who changed how they felt about him on whether he was, you know, innocent or guilty, whatever you thought, did you have a change of mind after watching it? If you saw it, that I'm always curious to see when people have a change of mind on something, or because I do think a lot of times people they believe something and they just don't change their mind, regardless of you know what happens or if any facts come up or anything that they see. I do think that people tend to just hold on to whatever they, thought. I just think that's a natural reaction by most people. But I'm curious to know if anyone actually felt different. Like, man, I thought this guy was innocent, but after I saw that, this guy definitely did it. Or if you thought he was guilty and you saw this and you said, I don't believe he did it. In either case, I'm just curious to know. Now, my thoughts on the show. For me, it confirmed to me that he did it because I always thought he was guilty. I've always believed that if there was other people responsible or someone else, somewhere along the line, something would have leaked, or someone would have discovered something. Just something else would have, led to a different direction. And that never really happened, and there was just so much circumstantial evidence. It was just so obvious, and it was a crime of passion, and it just everything points to him, like it had to be him. I'm not going to go through the case or anything like that, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the actual confession or the lost tapes, whatever they called it. Um, I thought it was bizarre that the things that stood out to me the most was how forthcoming he was when before the show. I was like, okay, I'm gonna watch this, but I was totally expecting this to be one of those clickbaity type of programs that lead you to believe you're gonna see something huge, and it doesn't deliver. It's like we already know what's in this tape, and we're gonna put it out there and make it seem like, whoa, this is it. This is the smoking gun, and so I was expecting it to be like, okay, at the end of the show, you walk away and you're like, I really didn't learn anything new, and he really didn't confess to anything, and it was just a big, ratings grabber. So that's what I was expecting, but I was surprised at how open he was and how angry he still was. This was supposedly filmed in 2006. Many years after the actual murders, and to see him still harbor so much anger and resentment in connection with the case. It was more than just, hey, I was accused falsely type of anger. You know, it was almost as if it just all happened and he was still going through it. It was really in your face. And he kept trying to make sure that, to use that word hypothetical and everything. In other words, if I had done it, this is how it would have happened, but this is all hypothetical. And yeah, it was to promote a book. I get that. But this goes way beyond it. And you just got to read people and the way they act when they talk. And there was so much there to pick apart. And, the one thing that's immediately stood out to me, and I kind of knew beforehand, right? If you ever just followed anything about O.J. Simpson and stuff, he just has this arrogant, sociopath type of mentality, and he just always has that look like he wants to control the narrative. In other words, whatever you think of him, he can change it. He can change your mind. He can make you like him or make you believe his innocence. And a lot of people are saying this guy was so stupid for doing the interview. And yeah, he was stupid for doing it. But in his mind, I can see why he did it, because he thinks I can outsmart any interviewer. So no matter what they ask me, I'm going to tell them what I need to tell them. And they're going to walk away and they're going to believe that I was innocent. And they're going to totally understand, why I beat her, why I was angry, So he didn't like the narrative that he was a wife beater and all the stuff that came out in the news and stuff. And that really was something that ate away at him. And you could tell that he didn't like that the public saw him, that he wasn't a good guy. He talked a lot about that he felt that the way he lived his life, people should see him as a good guy. And it really bothered him that they didn't anymore. And I'm telling you, this is why he did the interview. I know, a big part of it was to promote a book and stuff like that, but his main goal was to shape the narrative on him and how people viewed him. And that's what really stood out to me. The anger, it just, there was a lot of bizarre stuff in the interview. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but most of that stuff was covered by the panel that was there. You had Christopher Darden, the old prosecutor. You had Nicole Simpson, one of her closest friends there, and other people talking about the case and what they thought of the interview. But at the end, there was a lot of stuff he just blurted and revealed that even as a quote-unquote hypothetical, which was his desperate attempt to just say, hey, this is just me, what-if scenario, which makes no sense for him to do that. But there was a lot of stuff there that only the person who really killed her would know. He actually admitted at one point that the glove that they found was his, that he at one point doesn't remember taking it off, and he left it at the scene, and that must have been what happened, he says, because the glove was there. So he really tripped himself up. And obviously it's not a courtroom setting where his lawyers could step in and refuse to allow him to answer certain things. And so he's there and he thinks he can outsmart the interviewer. And this is what happens with people like a sociopath like him. He thinks I'm smarter than everybody and I can manipulate the interviewer and anyone watching this, and they'll believe what I'm telling them. And it really didn't happen. That's not the way it seems to have worked out. So that's one thing that really stood out to me. There was a lot of other stuff throughout the whole interview. He was just really angry at Nicole, and he was so arrogant, and it just stood out. And so that was the majority of the interview. But the thing that stood out to me the most came at the very end of the show. And he came out and admitted that he went to Nicole's grave and that he was upset with her still, and that he was yelling at her. And the reason it stood out to me, one, that's not normal behavior for anybody. But the other thing that, and I didn't see anyone talk about this on the panel, I'm sure it must have at some point dawned on them, but I picked up on it, and it really stood out to me more than anything. And it doesn't make sense to me that if you're innocent and you didn't kill your ex-wife, the mother of your children, you didn't kill this woman, you're really innocent, why are you so angry at her? She's the victim of a murder. And throughout, he's always got this attitude of, like, he's blaming the victim. Like, he's upset at her. It's like, you deserve what you got. You know what you did, whatever it was. And look at you now. And I tried to tell you. What innocent person who had nothing to do with her murder would think that way? Why is he treating her like she's responsible for her own murder? And that's what stood out most to me. And an innocent person would never think that way. This was the mother of your kids. And if you want to say, yeah, he's upset because he had to go through a trial and all these false accusations, well, one, this was many years later. He had plenty of time to settle down from the anger and really look at things objectively and say, look, being the position I was in, it's obvious people were going to blame me. We did have domestic dispute issues and stuff like that. I get it now, but I am innocent. That would be more of what I would expect to see from an innocent person. But this is all these years later, and he's still as angry as if it just happened. Where's all this anger coming from, and why are you blaming this woman, somebody you claim to profess to love, the mother of your kids? Wouldn't you be like, someone murdered you, and it's sad, and I wish I could find out who it was, and I feel so terrible for the kids? None of that came out. It was all about his anger towards her, and even when she was in her grave, he was still upset. That stood out to me more than any of the other obvious stuff that popped up during the show. And that's what I found most interesting, to be honest with you. It was the last couple of minutes when that came up. He admitted to doing that. And Nicole's friend, who was there, she said it. Yes, we actually know that he did that. And it's like, what other reason on the entire planet could you have to go to her grave and react that way with such anger to a person who was a murder victim? And you're acting as if she caused her own murder. Like, he knows that she did something and she deserved to die. Who would know that other than the person who killed her? He's the one who's mad at her. He knows in his mind why she made him do that. And that, to me, seemed to stand out the most. Like, I killed you and I told you and you didn't listen to me, and look at you now, and look at all this mess I'm in now because of you. You made me do this. That's what I got from him. From his behavior, his attitude, and that admission at the end of doing that. None of that makes sense unless he is guilty, he killed her. So I just thought that was the most interesting part for me, was the very end. And that nobody else really seemed to talk about that. The other stuff for me was pretty obvious. There was a lot of obvious shit that went on through the whole show. And so I'm curious to see, did anybody see it? What do you think? Did you change your mind about him? Did you think he was innocent and now you like, oh my God, this fucking guy must have did it? Or did you think he did it and you saw this and somehow you walked away from this and you said, I think he is innocent? I mean, I just got to ask that question because God knows who would think that, but maybe somebody does. So I'm curious to know what you guys thought. Yeah, I know this is a little change of pace, but I just found it really interesting. I saw the show, and I'm curious to know what you guys thought, and I wanted to talk about that, that part at the end, because I really thought that was something interesting, and it stood out to me, and I want to know if it stood out to anyone else, because I did find that really strange. So, what do you guys think? And I look forward to your comments.